I was always incredibly curious about the world. I was that kind of annoying toddler that you might come across that was constantly asking why, why is the sky blue? Why does the grass grow? Constantly pestering my parents. And when I got to 7, I had this strange obsession with sunglasses. Don't ask me why, I can't tell you why, but I loved sunglasses. And so I had over 15 pairs. And I got to the point where, rightly so, my mum basically said, look, I'm not buying you any more sunglasses. You're not spending any more pocket money on sunglasses. This is ridiculous. And so in that moment, I turned around to her and I said, well, if you're not going to buy me any, I'll make my own. And that was the start of my inventing journey. That little sassy moment turned into the passion and love and hopefully the career that I will go into. This pair of sunglasses was special to me because it was the start of my journey. So when I decided that I was going to make the sunglasses, I decided if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to make a pair of sunglasses so that I never have to buy another pair. And so what these are is basically 2 layers, one which has a polarizing lens and one which is just glued onto a pipe cleaner, but it's also another polarizing lens. And basically if you take 2 polarizers and you put them up against each other and you twist one, it starts to get darker or lighter depending on the angle that it is. And so at 7 years old, I decided that it would be reasonable to stick magnets and pipe cleaners and an extra polarizing lens onto sunglasses, hence why they're so attractive, obviously. And so, as I said, that was the start of my journey. Since then, I've moved on from things that only concerned myself and looking to how I can help the world around me, much like what you guys are going to be doing today, trying to solve scientific and engineering problems in the world. And so one of my greatest projects was called Smart Armour, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But as I said, I was always curious. Even earlier than 7 years old, here's a photo of myself and my brother doing the famous bicarb soda vinegar experiment. Have you guys done that one? You put bicarb soda vinegar and it makes such a mess, but it's really fun. When I think about it, I was always a scientist. I was always an engineer. And I want to encourage you guys that programs like this, what they're showing you is that you don't have to wait until university, or you don't have to wait until you get a job to be an engineer or a scientist. You can start now. And that's what we're going to be doing with these Astro socks, which I'm very excited about. For me though, my greatest invention and probably my proudest moment was with Smart Armour, the scale mail armour for radiation therapy. What this is it's a copper scale mail device for women going through breast cancer treatment that I came up with when I was in year 10, a little bit ago now. Basically what happens is during radiotherapy, women's breasts are exposed to an excess amount of radiation. The breast that's not being treated also receives this radiation as an unwanted side effect. And so this can cause things like skin burning. So imagine when you get sunburnt, imagine that, but getting that every single day for 8 weeks straight. That can cause 2nd and 3rd degree burns. It can also cause them to have an increased likelihood of developing cancer in that other breast later in their lifetime. And so this device was made out of copper scale mail. Think Roman armies, Persian armies, kind of the scale mail armour that they wore. That's exactly what it's made out of. Just different material and reapplied. And so it's able to reduce the dose to that contralateral breast by up to 80% than what it was already receiving. Now, as I said, a lot of these projects stemmed from my base interest in engineering and inventing and wanting to find out more, but really at the core of it, it was just curiosity. This is something that I encourage you guys when you're doing all your designing today and when you're working. Curiosity is more than just interest in something. It's asking questions. It's thinking hard and asking the questions that sometimes no one else will dare to ask. Whether this be, why am I doing something the way I'm doing it? How else could I be doing it? Or something a lot more subject specific. I would encourage you guys to really look into this and try to challenge what you're already thinking. This was something, again, that I came across in my own experimentation with Smart Armour. In radiotherapy and kind of in radiation shielding in general, lead is globally promoted as the best radiation shield out there. We use it for when you go to, I don't know if any of you guys have had the unfortunate pleasure of having an x-ray at the dentist, but they'll place a lead apron kind of over the top of your body to protect you from the radiation that you're receiving. And that's because, we all know radiation's bad for you. And lead has just for the longest time been accepted as the best shield out there. However, in radiation therapy, the actual beams and the energies that they're using are much higher than X-rays and radiation that we see in pretty much any other application in life. And so when I was designing my shield, one of the major questions that I had to ask was, well, what am I going to make it out of? You know, lead seemed like the logical and obvious choice, but I hadn't worked in the field yet. I was in year 10. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know this, quite frankly. And so I just decided to test a bunch of different materials to see how it would go. And what I found is that out of the first 3 materials that I tested, which were aluminium, copper, and lead, copper was actually 20% more effective than lead at the skin surface. Now, again, the skin's one of the most radiation sensitive parts of the body, example sunburn. And so this was quite astonishing to the extent that when I went to my supervisor for the project at the time, and I gave him the results and very excitedly, was saying, copper's more effective, this is really cool. He told me to go back and repeat my experiments because something must have been wrong. That's how accepted lead is in this field. And so I repeated my experiments again, came up with the same results. Repeated my experiments again, came up with the results. 5 times I repeated my experiment, doing different methods with exactly the same findings. And what we ended up discovering is that in radiation, because it's such a high energy for radiation therapy, there's actually an interaction that's occurring between the X-rays and the lead that isn't seen in any other circumstance, like when you're at the dentist. And so basically what's happening is you're having high energy radiation come in. We had the lead and it was interacting and it was absorbing it all, but then it was re-emitting low energy radiation off the bottom. And this was a major discovery that was incredible for my project. And incredible for the field because it's something that hadn't been discovered before. And it purely came from the fact that I was in year 10, I hadn't had a degree in the subject, I didn't really know what was supposed to be right. And that's the awesome position that you guys are in. A lot of people might tell you being young, you don't know anything or you're not qualified for the STEM area, but I say that's completely false. You guys have the advantage of being young. You're able to think outside of the box, and that is your greatest asset. That's why you guys are able to contribute so much to these sorts of fields, because you're able to think past what other people think's correct and to what is actually true. You guys have the capability of finding that. So I want to very quickly go over a thinking framework very quickly just to explain to you guys, and it's called design thinking. And I want you to try to keep that in mind today when you're designing your Astro socks. So design thinking is basically used in many different fields, and it's a 5-step process that we go through to try to ensure that what we're creating is going to be useful for whoever we're creating it for, and not just we think it's going to be. You see all those kind of memes online where it's the people who create something that's absolutely useless and no one needed. Those people, I can guarantee you, didn't use this process. So what are the 5 steps? As I said, we're looking at working with people, so designing for the people. So in this case, you're going to be designing for astronauts on the International Space Station. You're going to be challenging assumptions, as I said with the lead example. I want you to challenge things that we think we already know, whether that just be through your thinking or through research. I want you to do that. I want you to redefine problems constantly. Go back to the problem that you're trying to solve and think about how you can view it in a different light, because sometimes that may help you come up with something awesome. And finally, it's about creating innovative solutions that hopefully no one else has thought of or come up with before. So our 5 steps for this, just to keep in mind. So first is empathize. So what we're looking at for design thinking, you're empathizing with your end user. So again, in this case, International Space Station or astronauts. Honestly, I can't think of a better group of people to be trying to get in the headspace of. So trying to think about, what are they going through in their daily life? What are problems that they encounter? What are things that you could potentially fix for them? Especially in looking with these socks, like what are they going to become? Like, you could create a great pair of socks, but if they're not comfortable, I can guarantee you no one's going to want to use them. So thinking about all of these considerations, remember you're designing for a person. You're also then trying to solve a problem. So that's our second stage, which is the define stage. So defining a problem clearly. How are you viewing your problem? How you're viewing a problem going to change what you come up with? So thinking about the problem in a different light can often really help. Our third section is ideate. This is one of my favorite sections. It's where all the cool ideas happen. One of the parts of ideation as well is that I want you to try to not be thinking about what's not possible. when I run sessions like this, I love to encourage kids to write as much as they can down in every single idea, even if it's incredibly crazy or impossible. You know, if you want to be designing rocket-powered shoes and that's one of your ideas, awesome. That may not necessarily be possible yet, but sometimes those ideas can spark other ideas, or you may decide that you want to combine a couple of ideas and that actually is possible. The fourth stage is the prototype phase, which you guys will be getting onto a bit more later today as well, and in the program. And that's really coming up with the device, testing it and all that sort of stuff. And then finally, feedback. You're looking at going out into the community, asking people for their ideas, what do they think about it, actually showing it to your end users if you can, but basically just getting as much feedback as you can. The one other thing to keep in mind about design thinking is it's not just the 5 steps and then you're done, that's it. At any point during this process, it's what we call an iterative process. So you can go back to the start, you can go back to the second step at any stage. If you come up with a final product and you're getting feedback and you realise that you didn't define your problem correctly, or the way that you were looking at your problem maybe wasn't the best way to be looking at it, you can go back through them again. So that's mostly it from me. I want to thank you guys and get onto the program. I'm really excited about this one. As I said, you guys are looking at Astro socks. My general love for astronomy and astrophysics is very large. I said I'm doing material science and engineering, but I hope to be working in the space industry in the future. And I know you're probably thinking, what the heck does that look like? So my field of potential research, hopefully in the future, looking at things like if we're going to go to Mars, which we will, how are we going to protect them from the radiation levels that they're seeing there? You know, how can we design suits for them that are going to be comfortable, that they can live in daily, but that are going to keep them safe? Another one, there was a space shuttle incident many years ago, but where they didn't have the correct plates on the shuttle, and so because they weren't using the right material, it ended up burning up when they were re-entering the atmosphere. So things like that is what I love looking at in the future, and even at the moment. So if you guys want to ask me any space questions, I am a nerd. I've also been fortunate enough to go to the European Space Agency. So everyone's heard of NASA, right? Yeah, okay. Has anyone heard of the European Space Agency? Yeah. Awesome, couple people. So basically the European Space Agency is predominantly in charge of the International Space Station. They are in charge of training all of the astronauts that have to go to the International Space Station, no matter what country they come from. And I've been fortunate enough to actually go to their facilities and basically do a couple of try out what being an astronaut in training is like. And I can tell you it's hard work. So anything that you guys can do today to make their lives easier whilst they're up there, I can tell you they would be very thankful if you guys come up with some really cool ideas. So thank you guys. I'm going to hand back to Manny Dave. Awesome.
So my name's Dave, and I thought we'd take the opportunity, since we've got Macinley here for a little bit, to just ask her a few questions. So I want to start by asking you, why do you want to be an inventor? What's cool about being an inventor?
It started because I was self-obsessed and wanted to solve a problem for myself. But I think being an inventor is really cool because what you get to do is solve problems. I know that sounds like a really weird thing to like, but for me, looking at the world around me and being able to see a problem and then actually go and tackle it is really rewarding, especially when I know that potentially I can be helping people, the planet, through doing so.
Okay, cool. And when you're at school, so you did that sort of in your backyard at home, what stuff at school helped you actually do those things? So what did you learn that actually then you were able to apply? Was there anything you learned at school, or did you learn it all by yourself?
Yeah, so it was definitely a mix. I think at school I was fortunate enough, again, to have some phenomenal teachers who were willing to answer my questions outside of class time, and willing to help me when I pestered them and were asking for advice and help on experiments outside of class. But definitely in year 9 and 10 we had to do student-led research projects, which for me was the best thing ever, because basically it meant that I was allowed to be doing my science projects and be doing those in class with the support of other people around me. That's one thing I think I've definitely learnt. As you said, most of that was done in my backyard, and so that was a very individual process. But I've definitely learnt through school, probably the most valuable thing is the collaboration and the teamwork. You know, having one person inventing and doing it by yourself is one thing, but when you have other people around you, whether it be classmates, teachers, for me at the moment it's uni students, being able to innovate and invent together is often so much more effective, and it's a lot more fun as well. You know, you're able to bounce ideas off people, you're bringing diversity of knowledge, of background, all to the plate, and all of that really certainly does help.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you had that pretty cool invention, the armour, and you talked about those steps of design thinking. So when you looked at that, how did you get into the mind of somebody, or think about, was it the radiographers or was it the patient? Who did you think about the most?
Yeah, so at different stages it was different people. So initially for the project, what really got me, I suppose, into it was empathising with the patients and their experience. I was lucky enough for that particular project, my dad did work in the field, and so it started from him just kind of coming home from work one day quite visually upset, and you know, I asked him, you know, why was he upset, and he was just kind of having one of those moments where he was just reflecting, and what his job was amazing, he was helping these people, but they were still going through so much pain, and knowing that through treating these people, that the treatment that they were giving them to heal them was potentially causing cancer for them later in life as well. It was really hard to just sit with that fact. And so what really started it was empathising with those patients and their experience and that fear that they would be going through. And that, you know, understanding that experience and talking to people stayed with me throughout the whole process. When I finally got to the stage of not just experimenting but designing the device, then I was taking into consideration, you know, the nurses who would be handling the device. If it was going to take them an hour to set up the device when they've only got 15 minutes to treat a patient, that was not going to be particularly useful. So trying to make it easy for them, easy for the patient, all those sort of things come into it.
Okay. All right, and final question for me, and boys, if you want to ask a question after this, you can. All right, now let's just go into the future a bit, and you invent something that is for space travel.
Yep.
But the requirement is,
okay,
because you invented it, if you want it to actually see it be implemented, you're the only one, because you invented it, that knows how to use it. So you have to travel into space. Yep. Do you do it?
I think I would.
Yeah.
As in, I've never wanted to go to space. I know it sounds like a really weird thing. I think every kid dreams of going to space. I was not that kid. I was just fascinated with space. And knowing the amount of work that goes into being an astronaut, I'm not sure that I could ever do it. I'm shocking at memorization, and the amount that they have to know just at the click of a finger in case something goes wrong. I don't think I could realistically work under that in those situations, but I definitely, if given the opportunity, I think I'd take it.
Yeah, cool. Boys, any questions from you before we get started into, I know you're itching to sort of play with the stuff that's on your desk, but any questions from you for Macinley about, you know, being an inventor, being a scientist, or things that you want to know about what you can do right now? Yeah, let's go at the back there, and then I'll come here.
With your inventions, how much time did you spend researching before you actually started designing them?
Yeah, so for me, what I would usually do is I'd do a project each year, and so usually my project spanned about 8 months from kind of beginning to end, and predominantly I'd spend about 3 months doing research. And I know that sounds like a really long time, but I'll encourage you, research doesn't just have to be reading in books or reading on Google. For me, the researching phases were also doing experiments. So in that sort of project that I was explaining, researching for me was actually getting into the lab and getting into the hospitals and actually testing the radiotherapy, you know, how much, and finding out how much dose, things like how much dose was the other breast actually getting. You know, I'd read some statistics, but I was doing those measurements as well to find out, you know, what type of radiation was hitting that other breast, how much of it. And so that comes into the research phase as well. You may be thinking, oh yeah, that's an experiment, and it is. But I think in science, we often segment it and go, oh, research is just reading, or it's just looking up things on Google. But yeah, it wouldn't have been until about 3 months where I actually started thinking, okay, what am I designing? You know, what materials am I going to use? What's it going to look like? How's it going to work? But those first 3 months did still have experiments in them, if that makes sense.
Cool. Got a question here, and then I'll go up there. Yep.
How did you get the resources to make the invention? I know you can't just go up to your, you know, Bunnings, just get letter sheets and just start experimenting.
Yeah. Ironically, a lot of it was just Bunnings and eBay. I know that sounds counterintuitive. As far as the actual radiation therapy, I was very fortunate. Well, I say fortunate. I can be really annoying when I want to be. And so basically I'd asked my teacher, and how do I get access to a radiation therapy lab or hospital? Like, I'm a year 10 student, what do I do? And so they kind of, helped me compose some emails, and I sent them off to about 10 different hospitals asking if, someone would supervise me. And I was lucky enough that after a bit of pestering, one of them said yes. So perseverance definitely came into it. But every single one of my other projects, like the sunglasses, I've done work in sanitising, like water sanitation for developing communities, renewable energy, delivering medicine to children. All of those really have just been with resources that I could get off eBay or that I could source online or at Bunnings. Ironically, for one of my projects, I used a McFlurry spoon, like from McDonald's, and I used it literally just ended up being that the McFlurry spoon, actually, I don't know if you guys remember, but they used to have McFlurry spoons that had like a square opening, like handle, like it was like a prism. And so that having that opening in a spoon, which is very uncommon, ended up being perfect for the design application that I was trying to use it for. So really I encourage you looking at the world around you, what resources you have, what you can access, what you can buy off eBay, Amazon, all those sorts of things. The copper scale mail, I built all that by hand. So it was legitimately built with, I did have to buy like a specialized punch, imagine like a hole punch but for metal sort of thing. So I bought one of those for about $50, was able to source some copper from a metal shop, which I think are in most cities sort of thing. And I just sat there punching these out and then just getting jump rings and a set of pliers and just putting it all together by hand. So I would encourage you, there's a lot that you can do just by looking around you.
Cool. Yep.
So I've got a similar question. As a student, where did you get all the funding to do this?
Yeah, so this is going to sound really strange. As part of it came from school. I was fortunate enough, just starting out, I would utilise as much of the school and labs and stuff that I could. From that, I also had a job which, as I said, science and inventing for me, it was a passion and hobby. And, other kids did swimming, I did science. And so the money, when I got a bit older, that I was getting from my job was going back into my science projects. And also, one really cool thing was I was in a lot of science competitions as well. And so basically how a lot of that worked was if I did well at science competition, the prize money for 1 year would go to doing the next year's project. And so it was kind of like it ended up being almost a circulatory process for me. But yeah, it was just job and trying to do well at science competitions.
Awesome. Well, we're going to thank Macinley there, and thanks so much for the great questions, boys. That was really good.